Awesome. So we are recording. So
Awesome.
Mehdi, would you mind telling me a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely. So I guess we can start when I was in uni. That's where I met Ayub, my co-founder. And we really kind of connected around this passion that we both had for optimizing our health, but also, obviously going to the gym, training together. And we started to really, dive deeper in the whole space, trying every single wearables, reading the papers, reading all the books related to, optimizing health as well as longevity. And, during all those years, we kind of knew we wanted to build a company together. Obviously, we wanted to build it in this space because we were spending all of our time thinking about those topics. So when the time came, we actually started working on a slightly different project. Actually, we were exploring everything related to digital therapies for pre-diabetes. So there are a lot of them in the US doing some great work helping people with pre-diabetes reverse the condition and go back to healthy metabolism. But there were no significant solution in Europe at that time. So we were exploring this space. And while we were doing so, we started seeing a lot of people with diabetes wearing those continuous glucose monitors. So, we are both very curious people and always, we always love experimenting with those wearables. So we decided to, give it a try, see what was coming out of those devices. And we actually both discovered that our glucose control was very poor, meaning the diet we were consuming was really not adapted to our individual metabolism. We had very high glucose level on a daily basis. So we were, at first we were really shocked. We did not expect to see that. So it was really a wake-up call. And we felt we needed to enable more people to have access to these types of data. And basically be able to understand how the diet they consume, how is it impacting their health and metabolism. So we built the first solution on this specific idea, providing people with this data and helping them to understand. And after a few months, we kind of felt that there was potentially something even better to be built. Mainly because, data is very helpful and it will help a lot of people understand what is happening. But you also have the psychological dimension where, data will work very well for a specific group of people, namely athletes and biohackers, optimizers. But to really go to kind of a more mainstream audience, which was always our goal, it feels like you need to have something on top of that. And an app that was really, extremely interesting for us to study was Strava. So, I guess most people will know Strava. So it's a social app, vertical social network on running and cycling and so on and so forth. And we felt that the social dimension on a specific vertical was an extremely compelling strategy. So we basically decided to pivot a little bit out of the CGM world and build what we call now the Strava for Health. So that's how we got to where we are today, building the Strava for Health at Vital.
One interesting point you just made was that you can have data which is good for a certain specific group of people. You said biohackers, athletes, etc., and probably people with a certain frame on the world, certain personality traits. But then actually getting results from that translating to your kind of actions and psychology and those things, that's a separate battle. In building Strava for Health, how have you used learnings from psychology, behavioral psychology? What kind of input has that had in what you've done?
Yeah. 100%. I really believe that, data will be extremely helpful, but I genuinely right now believe it's quite wrong to think that only giving data will necessarily improve a situation. I'll just give you a couple of examples, both from my individual experience, but also from the experience of all of those people, the hundreds of people we talk to. Very often when the information that you get from those wearables isn't necessarily good, meaning, you might have some metrics you need to improve. You might even have some metrics that are simply bad. Like you might have very poor sleep. You might have very, poor glucose control. And these things are, part of life. So for most people, they'll find something that are not so good, and it can easily create an increased anxiety around simply the fact of checking the metrics. Like you will see a lot of people who don't want to check the sleep tracking when they know they didn't sleep well. Same for people not wanting to check the glucose tracking when they know that they didn't do something positive for their metabolism. So here you can see that you really have a huge psychological dimension. And we are thinking a lot about it when building the product, because I think right now it's quite a little bit ignored by a lot of people in the space. And I think it's a mistake, because it's really something that you see repeatedly. You see also similar thing with weight tracking. A lot of people want to weigh themselves, but it's quite of a stressful moment to go on the scale every day. So, there are some solutions on product side. So, for example, only giving 7-day trend. This is one way of doing it, kind of trying to blur a little bit the variance on a day-to-day basis and really give people some trends, give people some overall directions, as opposed to giving them raw numbers that are extremely, anxiety kicking, so to speak. So that's something we think about a lot. There is no precise answer. So this is the way. It's more like acknowledging that this is a huge problem and always having it in mind when you have some product dilemmas or product conversations.
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially the point around 7-day trends and not giving just raw data. Have you thought about, when building the Strava for health, how are you going to avoid the problem that you've just described, but that someone has a good week, they're using your app, they're loving it. Next week, they flop, they eat garbage, they don't exercise. And really, I get this when I don't want to open my personal banking app and see what my bank balance is, but you just don't open it and you just stop using it because you're going to get a health anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that is definitely one of the biggest challenges. In a sense that, we all have those goals of, being healthy, remaining healthy, and kind of staying engaged with those long-term goals. But obviously there are the holiday weeks or, different types of problems that come in and out of life. And the key is, to also enable different types of things in the app. Namely, a lot of social features. You can have your community and also have a community and features that are not only performance oriented. When everything is performance and type of perfection oriented, you always want to have the green score. You always want to kind of do better than last time. These things, they work very well at first, but as you said, as soon as you get out of it, you fear coming back. And I think this is definitely a big challenge to think about. So we see the way to overcome that will be again really on how do you design things. What are the pop-up messages that you show? Is it like you've done something very bad, or is it something that's going to be encouraging? For example, resurfacing the fact that 90+% of people have also those bad weeks or bad days, and really helping people understand that 1 week or even 1 month of something less than optimal isn't a big deal in the grand scheme of things. The big deal is really, am I going to stick to something that is, let's say, 80% optimal, but for 20, 30, 50 years, and not did I get like a perfect score for a week? Basically that's the idea.
You mentioned feedback and how we can tackle that. And there was a really interesting article in the Harvard Business Review that was posted, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, called The Feedback Fallacy. And essentially that was talking more about a business environment, but it was basically saying that we think that giving people negative feedback is helpful and it will help them alter their behavior in a way to make them better. And we often do it with good intentions. But they really found that, someone developing or performing is almost like the buds of a branch budding off, so like a tree growing essentially. And really, you need to nurture what people are doing correctly with positive feedback, which actually helps people. And negative feedback, I mean, what they said was that it's rarely useful. It doesn't help people.
I fully agree.
Yeah. Do you kind of agree with that approach, especially
Fully
when you're
agree.
trying to
And this
change
is
people's health?
100% agree. And actually, this idea, maybe it was not formulated like that in our mind, but this is one of the key reason we wanted to pivot to more of a social product, in a sense that we are all social creatures and we all crave, kind of immediate gratification to some extent. This is why you see so many people spending a lot of time on social media. And I don't think we should see it as either good or bad. It's just the way it is. All right. So it can be leveraged in a bad way in some products, and it can also be leveraged in a good way in some other products. So of course, when you think about biohackers, athletes, Ironman people, these guys, they have amazing performances and they are really performance driven. So if you think of a product with those people in mind at first, you might end up creating a product that will not work for the mainstream. Because as we said, getting an Ironman guy to improve his performance of 10% is not the same thing as kind of onboarding someone that has some weight to lose and didn't exercise for years and years. So I really believe that by really building a social app, and obviously in the social app you'll have many different types of communities, but the mechanism are going to be the same, kind of helping each other reach some goals. The goals can be very small. The goal can just be walk 2,000 steps per day. It can be very small, but really the mechanism is always the same, pushing and congratulating something that is positive, and not saying to someone, oh, you have such a catastrophic metric. Even if it's true, they might have very poor metrics. But as we said, if you log in, you see everything in red. You see that you're, the worst 1% of everything. You cannot imagine that people are going to come back to this app and just, get those very bad messages on a daily basis. Like, I mean, I talk from my own experience, from having some metrics that I've been tracking that were very poor. I just stopped tracking them after some time, because, kind of having on a daily basis this message that something is bad, I don't think that it's productive. Like, yes, it's bad. You shouldn't hide it. You shouldn't kind of try to forget it at all costs. But I really believe now we need to create this new era of health optimization and understand that, data should be leveraged, I feel, in the background. But, the front end, the contact with the person needs to be, doing way more in terms of psychology and trying to understand how to keep someone for the very long term.
In terms of either your intuition, customers you've spoken to, or even the evidence, what does using community to alter this kind of behavior? What does it say? Is it a case that you get that kind of social pressure to turn up? Is it the case that you get that dopamine burst like you do on Instagram? Like, what is it particularly about community that's helping you improve your behavior?
Yeah. Many different things. So you definitely have a little bit of this competition. Again, it can be good, it can be bad. It's not in and of itself, it's neutral. It can be leveraged in a positive way and in a negative way, but it's very natural for people to want to do better or to do good when it's visible. So just the kind of fact that something is visible pushes a lot of people to try to go the extra mile. I'm in this group with my family, maybe I can just go for a quick walk. If we have this challenge, we're all together. It's visible. There's no way to lie about it. So a lot of people find this very helpful to, nudge them to go a little bit further and do a little bit more. Then you have some other aspects. You have talking about best ways of doing things, and just once people start to get interested in something, they really like to talk about it a lot. This is why you see a lot of those communities pop up in some external places, but they talk about health, performance, and so on and so forth. So one of our ideas is to bring all of those conversations on Vital. The advantage of doing that is that it would be natively integrated with all those sources of data, so the conversation could happen in a way that would be more relevant, as opposed to when it happens outside and that it's a little bit hard to explain what are we talking about. So those are definitely very important ones. And finally, again, why do you think that when you open the app stores, you see the top 20 apps over the last 5-10 years. What do you have? You have social apps, you have some games, and you have sometimes in and out some finance apps. The reason is, again, I really think these are part of how us humans are. It's very rare for people, when they have, 5-10 minutes to kill, to open something different than a social app. Like, we want to see what other people are doing. And here our thinking is, health is something that, so many people say they want to improve. They want to be, doing a lot of things for, but there isn't right now a place where health is fun, is something that is not only metrics and blog articles. So our idea is to make this whole process something, something social, something fun, where people can spend time, and the byproduct of that is that they take care of their health and they are engaged in a long-term pursuit of health optimization.
I want to talk a little bit about different metrics that wearables currently track. And I think common ones are things like heart rate, oxygen saturations, glucose monitoring, sleep, quantity and quality as well, although I think that's a bit iffy on how legit that is. But I just wanted to ask, out of these ones, are there any that you think are particularly interesting and useful? And conversely, are there any that you think are just not useful things that just are all hype and there's not really much substance to them in terms of not a useful thing to track?
Excellent question. So as you said, you basically named the main metrics. I think most of them has specific usage. So depending on your goals, depending on your situation, your health status, and your long-term goals, you might want to pay more or less attention to some of those. So I would say, definitely if I needed to kind of point to kind of what I think are the most important, I would say HRV, glucose, and maybe sleep duration. We can kind of deep dive more on sleep tracking and the accuracy of it. But let's say that with those three metrics, HRV, especially the trend of HRV, will help you understand how recovered or not recovered you are. The glucose, I think it's very interesting, specifically to potentially use kind of 4-6 weeks to understand how your classic diet is impacting your glucose levels. So, for example, in my case, I learned that I was consuming way too many carbs, basically, for my individual needs. So I was, constantly higher than I needed to be. So I did the change that I thought would work better, and now I improved significantly my results on this specific tracking. And in terms of the sleep, I definitely think it's good to try to get enough sleep. And the fact of tracking something, it can have detrimental effect, but honestly, I think for the most part, its positive effect is that you think about it in a sense. You try to think, oh, I should go to sleep now because yesterday I saw that I got only 5 hours of sleep. So it kind of forces you to see if something is not trending in the right direction. But once again, to go back to the initial discussion we had, I think that currently it's not done perfectly, but I think directionally data will be very helpful for these types of things in the future.
Yeah, I want to talk a bit about sleep, because there's a scenario in which you track your sleep or sleep quality, and there's a day in which you have a really good night's sleep, and then you wake up and for some reason your wearable device or your Strava for Health or Vital has told you that you've not had a good night's sleep. And then suddenly your mindset shifts. And I think studies again and again have shown that even if two groups of people sleep the same amount, if you tell one group they didn't sleep well and tell one group they slept well, the group that think they didn't have a good night's sleep, they actually perform worse on cognitive tasks and other things. So it seems 100%. Like there's a huge problem with that.
Here again, I have a very strong opinion on that, and I fully agree with you. I never care whether I have bad sleep, good sleep. I wake up, I go train, I work. It doesn't change anything. I really use it for more longer term trends. I will never use it. I mean, obviously, if I feel exhausted and like the sleep score in that case is very catastrophic. It's not like in the 50s or in the 60s. I mean, obviously, depending on the app you use. Here again, I think this can be vastly improved by product decision. How about when you wake up, you don't see anything before you enter how you feel, for example, or you kind of rate how is your recovery. So, for example, that could be a way, you can also, once again, just have an option so you don't see the score in the morning. You just see it on a weekly report to understand, trends, how your, recent habits have been impacting your sleep. Because again, I think that focusing too much on the single metric creates a problem that you name. Like, wearables are relatively new. So who is saying that, a 50 or 60% recovery is not what leads to sometimes the best days? And on a personal experience, I noticed that sometimes I perform way better in the gym when I have like average recovery. And I know a lot of people have experienced the same. So, we are entering, and we've been entering over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years, a new space of having this data that we did not have in the past. So although it is very tempting to say this metric, the healthier is this metric should be trending there. And, if it's not healthy, it's going in that direction. It can be tempting to bring that back to the, to the singular moment and say, thus, if, your HRV is bad today, you should necessarily, perform less well. I think this jump might not be true. Maybe when I think we are currently starting to understand that it's way more complicated than that. So here again, I think directionally this tracking will be helpful, but not necessarily in the way that is currently implemented in some of the most popular apps. And on a personal level, I don't really, care about the recovery score on a daily basis. More on a like monthly level to see, if there are some trends that I can pick up and try to improve.
Yeah, I think that's such a key point about these things being useful in a directional, long-term approach rather than obsessing over every single day, every single minute, what the value is. I wanted to also just talk to you a little bit about a problem I think that's quite a big problem in healthcare, which is the problem of feedback loops. So the problem that today the bad habits or the bad things that we do in terms of our health probably won't have consequences for another 4 or 5 decades. And to me, this seems like such a big problem in healthcare on a personal level and with patients I see as well, where you can smoke, drink, whatever, and the consequences are so far away. And I don't know, what do you think about, like, what can we do about this problem? Because again, I mean, doctors have been giving patients, in inverted commas, education and giving them all the data and all of the information they need. But, even the most surprising thing for me was that I looked at, vascular surgeons in the hospital, and a lot of them smoke. And for context, they spend a lot of their days amputating people's limbs. And the reason they're amputating them, a big reason, is because they were smokers. So you would expect that those people would be the least likely to smoke. But even with so much knowledge, just the fact that these feedback loops are so far away, people still do bad health habits. So, like, how do you get around that?
Well, that is the $1 trillion question. And here again, I'm going to go back a little bit to some of the elements that we mentioned, approaching it in a slightly different way. But the general idea is that knowing what to do has nothing to do with getting people to actually do it. The knowledge, which is the main focus of science and a lot of the recent technological efforts. And that's great. That's an important part of progressing and getting better outcomes. But again, as we see, like it doesn't work. It doesn't lead, doesn't push people to do what they have to do. So the whole point is, how do we bring the long-term outcome in the short term. Like you see similar situation with saving money. So finance app have a little bit of a head start on health apps here, is that, a lot of them are trying to push people to, save more money, kind of don't spend it now and build up your, the money that you'll be saving for the future. And I think for health, you have a similar situation in a sense. You can see, your, let's say, overall health score. Granted, it's calculated in a smart way. But here again, the moment you reap the rewards is going to be in 20, 30, 40 years. So I feel that it's really a matter of having this short-term dopamine and just feel good situation. We think that will be helpful for the long term. And this is, again, the reason we didn't want to be like a data-only solution. And we wanted to be a social app that will be habilitated to kind of provide people with some dopamine, granted they do think that will be beneficial for the long term. So, basically the idea is, let's create a platform where, doing things that will be healthy for the future. We can define what that is, but let's say that we defined it. Doing those things will be rewarded by the communities and create, an ever-growing group of people that is helping themselves to, stick to those habits and, basically get the reward also in the present as well as on the long term. So I really think that this will be a way that will be very, very helpful here. Maybe there are some other ways, but I sure think that, leveraging the fact that we are social animals, leveraging this fact will end up being very, very, very beneficial to really push people to stick to their long-term habits. And you see it actually, apps that really have a community at the center. Same for weight loss, like weight loss groups where people share their progress, are the one that outperform by very, very far. So I think, the ingredients are fairly simple. Obviously, the execution, once again, is not simple. But yeah, everything is about let's bring some celebration of the future, but in the present.
An interesting article that you linked on your newsletter was that from, I think it was Lara, and it was called something like Behavioral Change Through Wearables. And they basically interviewed a load of people who'd been using wearables and tried to seek out what had worked, essentially. So in what scenarios in which they've used wearables and this kind of data, and that it actually had positive health impacts. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the conclusion I got from that was that the most effective long-term strategy was when you use some kind of service, you use some kind of wearable, you use some kind of intervention, and you use that for a short period of time, maybe 6 months. And then through using that, you end up developing your own habits, your own steer. So you gave the example of continuous glucose monitoring for 12 weeks, realizing what foods work for you, what don't. But then the crucial point was that you don't really carry on using this for the rest of your life. You actually end up developing your own habits, and those are what carries on. Essentially, like, do you think that the role for these kinds of services, whether they're wearables or services themselves, is like a short-term intervention? Because then the business case for these is less interesting if it's something that you only use for a short period of time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's a bit of a tension there.
I know what you mean. So this is an excellent question. I think that on a personal level, I agree with the conclusion of this article. But I can also see the other point, meaning, let's take a wearable. It will bring and help you develop an understanding about your body, and it will help you develop good habits around this understanding, right? So that might be enough for a lot of people, but some people, just the fact of having this continuous tracking of the metric helps them stick to the habit that they created. So for example, when you wear a continuous glucose monitor, many times, you don't want to go eat that donut. You know what it will do. You don't want to see the spike. And if you're disciplined enough that you will go and see this data, you will not just skip the reading and you will actually force yourself to see it. it might prevent you from eating the donut on a different day. So I guess here again, we'll find that it works differently for different types of people. But I think for the vast majority of people, it's fair to say that there won't be a need to wear it all the time. And in terms of business use case, I think that the use case is still going to be very positive for all those companies, because we're still only in the early days. Even the most popular wearable company only sold kind of a few millions of those devices. For example, Aura just sold 1 million rings. So, it's a lot, but it's, we are, almost 7.5 billion people on Earth. So, there's still a lot of rings to sell. So even if people use it just for a few years or a few months, the use case might be positive for them. But I agree with you that it's hard to imagine that everyone will use those devices all the time and subscribe potentially to them for all the time. And this is why we are building Vital in the way we're doing it. And we know that also on a personal level, we're using on and off some of those tools. What we don't do on and off is being engaged in this long-term pursuit of health. So we're basically trying to be the place where those conversations, those self-experimentation happen, whether you're tracking sleep or glucose, or whether you just want to be engaged in a challenge with your family or your friends. We are trying to make all of those use cases available, and for the app to really stay in your life for the very long term. So that's what we're trying to do. But overall, I think that pretty much all of these approaches will find a fair amount of success, because we are still so far from having the mainstream really being involved in taking care of their health, that a lot of these things will be helpful.
From being a curious observer of products and services in this space, so you mentioned Aura, there's Peloton, there's loads of 8 Sleep, there's loads of things. And a common thing that I seem to see with these is that they all at some point have become quite cool. So either because of great marketing, hype, word of mouth, there is something where, an example of something that's probably I wouldn't consider that seen as cool is maybe like continuous glucose monitoring. It's at the moment you kind of get a device, I think from Abbott or a pharmaceutical company, you put it onto your arm, and it's kind of a medical device. It's not got a lot to it. But I think a key thing with Aura and all of these others is that they do become cool. There is some virality, there is some hype. First of all, do you think that assessment's correct? And then secondly, how do you think you can do that with Vital? Yeah,
I think that assessment is correct. You named some of the best companies in the space. They're doing some amazing work. I'm a big fan and admirer of those excellent companies. I think basically that a lot of people want to take care of their health, but for a long time it was kind of a little bit boring, not so cool, not so something that is aspirational, in a sense that you want, to be involved in those conversations around those metrics. So I think definitely that the first generation of Wearables did an amazing job at gathering the right people to be, talking basically for the whole space. And obviously, marketing did also a big part of the job here, because now it's cool to take care of your health, and I think it's great. It's also cool to do some other things, but it's health is something that I think most people will agree that is positive to take care of. Obviously, we need to make it more affordable. I believe we need to make it more. We need to include everyone in this pursuit. But it needs to start somewhere, and as always, it starts with a specific niche of people that are super into it, and that are helping really spread the word about those practices. And I think now we are at this shifting moment where we are starting to enter in the mainstream, not like really, really mainstream, but you start to really see those conversations pretty much in many groups of people, even people that are not like hardcore biohackers or anything like that. I think over the last 2 years, we're really entering a wider and wider group of people.
The last thing I wanted to touch on was your own personal habits and things you do. And I just wanted to ask very broadly, and feel free to go wherever you want with this, but are there any habits, are there any ways you approach things that you think have been helpful for you and for your career and for your health?
Yeah, so in terms of tracking and everything related to that, I tested pretty much everything. I mean, this is my job, so there's always this excuse of testing the thing for the work. But now the thing that I really stick to, let's say, in terms of tracking, so sleep tracking, I find it useful here again to really notice trends, also to notice HRV trends. Make sure that I improve those metrics over a long enough period of time. I also like to check my steps. So this is the OG, the OG metric, step tracking, the simple step tracking. I honestly find it very useful. I'm a big proponent of walking. I'm very lucky to live in a very walkable city, so I try to hit at least 15,000 steps per day. It is quite an amount, but it just helps me think better, just help me, digest better. For me, it solves pretty much 99% of problems. I also like to try my, calorie expenditure high. I have, quite a huge appetite. So for me, it's very essential that I, kind of exercise enough. And finally, I think one thing that is also very helpful is to find a physical activity that you deeply enjoy and where you try to get better. So maybe it's not for everyone, but I think it's very helpful to have that in some way as a way to unplug a little bit from the work and building a company or whatever else you're involved with. And it's also fun, you find also, once again, a community around this practice. You try to get better. Obviously, for all those pursuits, it's a slow process. You need to learn to accept that it's a slow process. For me, it has been weight training. So, specifically strength training recently. I really enjoy it. And I feel also it helps me on everything else in my life. So also for longevity, by the way, it's excellent for longevity to make sure you maintain enough muscle mass and strength. And yeah, so I would say these are the most helpful for me. And finally, I would say not obsess over thing. So this goes back once again to the whole flip side of tracking. It's very easy to adopt this a little bit obsession over those metrics. I think part of the problem comes from those products, but there's also a part of responsibility that needs to go to the user. We need to understand we need to be involved in that for a very long period of time. The goal is to optimize our health span, live as long and as healthy as possible. It's not to start, really obsessing over the fact that, we might have some poor metrics. In most cases, things are, reversible. And even if it's not, things are manageable. So I think kind of adopting this mindset of, not being overly obsessed with things is helpful. And yeah, so that's what I would say.
And secondly, are there any, career or ways you operate or other kinds of habits that you've used within that have helped you get to where you are? Are there any things that you think you've done that have been helpful?
In terms of habits specifically?
Yeah, maybe habits or ways you approach things or qualities that you have.
Yeah.
Just these different things that you think are unique about you that have helped you get to where you are.
Yeah, so I would say playing the long game. So this is why I named the newsletter The Long Game. I think right now, I don't know really why, but a lot of people, maybe more society as a whole, we're really obsessed with the short term. we kind of see all the times massive success of people on Instagram, on whatever other platforms. And I think it's very detrimental, especially for younger people. We need to understand, getting anywhere that is worth kind of, celebrating or that is kind of a huge achievement is a matter of decades. It's not something that you just going to work a little bit here and there and then get there. So I think the best way to do that, obviously this sounds very cheesy, but there's a lot of truth to that, is to simply learn to enjoy the process and understand it will take a while. So, just find a lifestyle and a day-to-day life that you enjoy and that is also aligned with your long-term goals. For me, it's really the thing that was a game changer. So, obviously you have big goals at Vital and personally like everyone, but I think, you still need to love your day-to-day life, because this will be, 99.999% of your life. So, I think this is a key point. It doesn't mean that every day needs to be, perfect, but I think there is a way to, kind of try to work on your perceptions and try to find something that works for you, that can be extremely game changing. Nothing crazy here. We're just talking about simple things, just being aligned with yourself. And yeah, for me, I would say this is the only thing that matters. That helps you really keep high energy for a sustained period of time. And finally, I would say, obviously things like, nutrition, exercise, sleep, this is the basics. Maybe I didn't talk as much about those because I've been in the whole, niche of optimizing health for, 7-8 years now. So these are the things that I fixed in the early years, but they are, I think, the most important still. All these advanced tracking, is and might be useful in the future, but we all need to understand, if you're walking enough, if you're getting those minutes of exercise, sleeping a fair amount and eating fairly clean. I know that there are nutrition wars right now, this clan versus this clan, so I'll not get into that. But let's say if you remove processed food, I think everyone agrees on that, on the fact that processed food are not good. So let's say just that, you will feel very good. The rest is a mindset game, and I think with all of that, that's as good as it gets.
I want to ask you about books, podcasts, newsletters, other recommendations you might have, specifically or broadly in the health space, in the business space, personal development. What kind of things do you consume that you think are really high value?
Well, I consume a lot. I consume a lot of content, so I try to kind of curate it in my newsletter, The Long Game. But the best sources, everything related to science. I think going back to the paper is always a good idea. I know you've been doing a lot of work on this front. But I think learning to read scientific papers is very good. Peter Attia has a very good guide explaining how to read medical and scientific papers, so I recommend that. In terms of content consumption, I try to really curate a lot of what comes to me. So I subscribe to newsletters. Specifically for health and wellness. Obviously, Peter Attia is one of the best resources here. In terms of podcasts, obviously you have Andrew Huberman kind of doing some excellent work on health optimization as well. Then I also love listening to audiobooks. I think, people might argue, can you really remember or really understand as good as when you read? I think this is a fair point. Yes, maybe it's not perfect, but you need to understand whether like reading actually on the paper is doable in your current lifestyle. For me, a little bit, yes, but not as much as possible. So I like to just listen to audiobook while walking, putting those two activities together. I find it very helpful. And yeah, for the recent good books, in terms of, so let me check my Audible app. Actually, I was just on Audible. I recommend Wanting by Luke Burgess. Maybe I butchered his name. Sorry, Luke. Very good book on mimetic desire. I also recently read Amp It Up by Frank Slootman. Highly recommend that for anyone building a company. In terms of mainly more product book, The Cold Start Problem by Andrew Chen, very good book. Hooked, obviously the classic, by Nir Eyal. A lot of books. I try to now read something when I really want to learn something specific. Before I used to just read for general purpose. Now I a little bit change things and I read something specific. If I want to learn about a topic, then I go and look for the books on this topic. So yeah, this is my approach. And a lot of good YouTube channels. Honestly, YouTube has become also a very good source of let's say infotainment, like information, entertainment. I think a lot of YouTubers are doing an excellent job here.
One thing I've noticed about you is that you work very, very hard. And I know you said before you try not to be obsessive, but I think in this, if you compare yourself to a general population or a sample of them, then potentially how much you work on these sorts of things, how much you read, how much you consume, how much you produce, it's probably considered obsessive, or it's at least top quartile or top percentile or whatever. But I just wanted to ask, do you think you'll always work this hard, or do you think that it's, because I know you write a little bit about this topic, but do you think it's something that's eventually going to taper off as you maybe get older, family come in, or do you think it's something that's core to you?
No, I don't think it will ever stop. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a good point. I don't think I'm obsessive, but here again, it's different people are wired differently. I have always been a little bit on the intense side. So when I say not obsessive, it's relative to me. Yeah, I really think once you try to find something that you deeply care about, I don't see the reason to stop or to do something with less intensity. I just really enjoy it like that. Also with the training, for me, this is my preferred way of living. I think definitely I'm a huge fan of David Goggins. For those who know, definitely a huge fan of David Goggins. I know that it's not, and I'm not saying it's good for everyone. I really believe in the fact that people need to do the work to understand what works for them. It might take years for you to understand what works, but there is really no, you cannot skip this part. Like, this is really impossible to skip this part. You can find people that you aspire to, do, something similar as what they did. But many times you understand that they were playing with different things that you're playing with. So you have to find your own way and your own type of intensity. Definitely here, there is no prescription, only exploration and yeah, but it definitely helps to be involved in something you care about. We go back to the whole point on passion or not passion. This is also a conversation for another time, but just it doesn't necessarily have to be like your passion, but definitely something you care about. You can care about things that are not your passion, but I think when you find that, you can really unlock a different type of intensity in what you're doing. So I would recommend that. But I'm very cautious in terms of kind of advice. Like, basically, I think advice are mainly correlation mistaken for causation. Like, this is not there is really no kind of general advice. Maybe just kind of try to understand how you work, but even then, I wouldn't be so sure. Maybe some people do very well by not asking themselves too many questions. So that's a very legit possibilities.
Last question. If in 5-10 years, Vital was a massive success by whatever metrics you deem so, what would that look like for you?
For me personally or for Vital?
Well, what would Vital look like? Like, what would make it a tremendous success for you?
Yeah, so I think if we can help a huge amount of people really love the process of taking care of their health and finding a community to do that, whether it's family or a community created within Vital, I would call that a huge success. Obviously, I tend to not define success by specific metrics. If you want to talk about kind of a company success, you can find some metrics to say, this is huge success or not. But I try to really be obsessed over the mission of Vital. I believe so many people right now, die too young or age very poorly. You see a lot of, actually, you see very few, 80, 90 years old, walking, hiking, and whenever I see some of them, I'm very happy to see that. And I just want that to be more and more common. Hopefully we can have some, new therapies that will help people live even longer than that in good health. But for the time being, I think we can do way better than that. So, if we could create a product that really pushes a significant amount of people to, stay engaged in those practices that are fairly simple, to be honest, and those fairly simple practices, if executed diligently, they would improve massively health span. So here again, we find that, yes, data will help a lot and we can do even better than the current health span. But there is also, some low-hanging fruits. The low-hanging fruits will maybe add 10, maybe 15 years of global health span. A lot of most people die from lifestyle diseases. Like, yes, aging is still a big thing, and even if you remove those, you'll not live to 200 years old. But I think we can get a lot of people, close to 90 or even 100 years in a fairly good state. At least this is what we're going to create.
Awesome. Thank you.